Hi, how are you doing? Welcome along to the fifth in a series of 9 free sales webinars with me, Keith Roselle, aka Sales Marvel. Today, we're going to be talking about deal qualification and what does that actually mean, deal qualification? It can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. So I want to give you just a couple of ideas around what that means. Okay, so the definition of deal qualification for me is knowing everything about an opportunity, a deal, before you decide to fully commit to what's going on. Okay, so that means it's understanding what the client wants to buy. That means it understanding what resources you need to put into it. The resources typically are time, people, potentially even cash, and certain services that you're going to need to deliver to help that client through that problem. It's also an understanding of what you're going to win if you decide to commit. Now, that sounds like a ridiculous thing. What do you mean? What are we going to win? That's part of qualifying the deal. Are you going to win a really big deal, a really small deal? Does it look like a rectangle? Does it look like a square or even a triangle? So it's just making sure you know what you're going to win so that there are no surprises, because surprises in business are not generally good. Even positive surprises, such as more cash at the end of the month, shouldn't really be surprises, because it means you've not been managing things correctly or tightly enough, okay? So I'll give you a really simple example on qualifying a deal. So imagine you're walking along and you see a Starbucks or another coffee shop or something like that, and you go inside and you decide you want a drink. So do you think you walk in there and by some kind of telepathy, the barista behind the counter gives you your cup of coffee without you telling them what they want? And what happens if they hand you over a black Americano, and in reality, you wanted a flat white? See, that's part of qualifying the deal. Asking for something specific and getting it in return for a fair price. That's about qualifying the deal. So that's a ridiculously simple example, but I hope you'll get from that some sense of what qualifying a deal really means. Now, in terms of that cup of coffee example, they might also ask you for certain options. Okay, so I'd like an Americano. And you might say, well, okay, what kind of Americano is it? Is that black? Is it white? Do you want some room for milk? Is it soy milk? Is it whatever? All the time, listening, really important skill, but actually refining what exactly they want, so you can deliver as a barista the great cup of coffee that the customer is expecting. Okay, so really simple example. So the caveats are, if you qualify into a deal, what does that really mean? That means it could mean a lot of work for you for not much payback, or if you lose, zero payback. Okay, so be careful what you qualify in for. You don't have to bid. And if you qualify out of a deal, i.e. you say, hey, thanks for the opportunity, but it's not really for us. It's not the right kind of deal for us. That can also upset the client, because maybe they needed 3 people to bid for a piece of business. Their procurement their procurement department were tasked with getting 3 people to bid. If you reject that, which you have every right to do, you may upset them. So just be aware that that could be an issue. Okay, so be aware of your actions and the potential impact of your actions. Excuse me. Okay, so understanding the deal, what the client wants to buy. And in terms of understanding that, the very best thing you can do is to start with why. Why, Mr. Customer, do you want to do this? And let's say you're outsourcing a piece of work. Maybe it's provision of technology services within your firm. Maybe it's manufacturing process, something like that. But ask why, and the answer to that question of why can be really revealing, really informative. Should be able to get some really rich information with which you can understand the customer's operating context, what issues they're going through, and ask for evidence. That's the next thing. Ask for evidence of what they're of the information. So if they might say, well, we're manufacturing food, we want to outsource whatever it happens to be, technology, let's say. Well, why do you want to do that, Mr. Customer? And the answer that might come back will say, well, okay, it's no, the IT that we've got is notoriously unreliable. We think it's too expensive. Well, okay, let's just kind of grab hold of that unreliability and that expense, and let's just ask for a little bit of evidence. Is that a perception thing that the client has, or is it reality? And if it is a reality, what's behind all that, and what issues is that causing the customer? So the evidence might be, okay, well, what evidence is there that it's too expensive? And they might say, well, other competitors relative to ours, in the same business, doing the same kinds of thing, their IT expense is, let's say, 2.5% of revenue, but ours is 3.5% of revenue. That makes our costs much too high, and they're not sustainable, and it makes us uncompetitive because our cost base is too high. So that's a really interesting piece of evidence that you can use to help shape your thinking and inform you about this particular client. In addition, you can ask them for what kind of budget have they allocated to this project. Now, the answer to that question can be really interesting as well. It could be, we haven't really particularly allocated any money to this project just yet. And so you might be thinking, well, okay, are you really serious about them? Are you just kind of kicking the tires? Are you going to put me to a load of work of which you're not really going to act upon? And here's a quick fact for you. Sometimes when you're working on big deals, I tell you now, 70% of them don't happen for whatever reason, myriad different reasons. Customer's not ready. The need goes away magically. The customer just hasn't got the management bandwidth to act on particular deals, and they move on to something else, which is causing them to pay more attention, just prioritizing. So just be aware that just because you put your best foot forward, they may still not be able to act and award you business. So that's part of uncovering evidence, if you like, about the customer's ready and their willingness to go through the process with you. Okay, so also ask them, because you're probably sat in a one-on-one meeting having this conversation, perhaps with the CIO, whomever, ask them who else is interested in this deal in the client company. And the answer to that question can also be revealing, because if the person sat opposite you, the potential client, says, "Oh, it's just me. Just come to me. That's it. You don't need to talk to anyone else." That for me is what I would call an amber light. And an amber light is something which kind of causes me to stop a little bit or slow down. It's like a traffic light. It's just a warning. Slow down a little bit, probably proceeding to a stop. And I want to ask some more questions. Well, are you sure you're the only one? I mean, this is a big company, or there's one person in the company. Surely someone else is taking an interest about something so fundamental as IT in this instance. And just kind of see what comes back, because if you say, no, it's just me, just come to me, you've got to think, well, this sounds a little worrying. Am I going to expend a lot of energy for zero return? Just keep asking questions about why is that? Should I not go and talk to the marketing department for whatever reason, and just get a more sort of global view, a more corporate view of what that issue actually is. Okay, so be careful about that. But also ask yourself, or ask the client, who has the ability to say no? And this is really important. Going back just pre the financial crash of 2008, I did a deal with a US investment bank, a relatively small deal, and it required three signatures: one person in London, one in New York, and another, I think, in London. Three separate people, a subordinate, a manager, and then someone in New York who would bless, stroke approve the deal. After the financial crash, there were many more signatures required to get the same sort of profile deal through that particular client. And on this particular occasion, I presented my evidence, my business case, my proposal. The client had bought into it, and it was for quite a large deal. It was for tens of millions of dollars, and it was a data center type transaction. And then in the sign-off process, there was someone that I didn't know, because it's a big firm, up in their property, an MD, someone senior in the firm, in their property business, their real estate business, who said, why aren't we giving this to IBM? I wasn't working for IBM, so that was a worry. So he had the ability to say no, and they're often much more powerful than people who have the ability to say yes, and that's a really important observation. So that's one of those sort of black swan events that can only come out of, frankly, just knowing your particular client and being able to ask those questions up front and get those revealing kind of statistics. So people who have the ability to say no are often much more powerful than the people that have the ability to say yes. The other thing that's really important is guessing. Now, guessing in itself isn't an issue as long as you recognize what you're doing. You're guessing. So sometimes the answer to a question isn't always known, but in order to put your quotation together, you don't know. You have to make an assumption. So if you make an assumption like, well, I'm guessing there's 50 people in this firm, and therefore I'm going to provide a quotation for 50 users of IT. Okay, that would be, and that's going to make your price up here somewhere. So as long as you make your assumption that there are 50 users, the customer knows in advance, okay, they're quoting for 50. Well, it only happens that there's 38 people in our company, and therefore you could have saved them about a third of their costs or a quarter of their costs by asking that question, or the customer even knowing that information. Okay, so that said, so the message around deal qualification is you listen, and you ask what I would call high gain questions. And a high gain question is a question that gets you some valuable information, not just information, but valuable information, perhaps inside information, not financial services inside information, but valuable internal information that helps you kind of really shape your deal, if you like. And also, if you ask a high gain question, there's a good chance that you can actually demonstrate your credibility in that, in asking those questions. You can cause the customer to think, gosh, this person really knows what they're talking about. They're asking some really insightful questions, and they're gathering evidence, and that builds rapport, builds trust, builds respect, all things that you need in order to be able to do a deal with, at a reasonable level with a big customer. Okay, right. Okay, also part, slide 2, if you like, of deal qualification is understanding what you have to sell the client. And by that, I mean set expectations. So if the client is a really big client, but you've only ever done small deals, the client would be best advised not to invest in your company, because you might mess them about, you might mess them up. So you have to set expectations about, well, we can deal with 50 people, but we can't deal with 500. And therefore, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Client, but I'm going to walk away. In doing that, what you do is you build respect in terms of they will thank you for not wasting any more of their time. Nobody likes having their time wasted. And in addition, you build reputation because you didn't take your own company into bat for a deal that would have been a lot of trouble for you had you have won it. And also, if you win a deal, will it satisfy the customer needs? So the customer might tell you, I want to buy a triangle, but in your knowledge and your knowledge of their world that they're operating, you might believe they need a rectangle, let's say. So, but if you sell them a rectangle, is it going to meet their needs? Well, not if they want desperately to buy this triangle. You have to keep asking why. Why is it you want to buy that triangle? Whatever it happens to be. But anyway, roll back from that. And if you can't, if they want to buy a triangle, but you've only got a rectangle, and I realize I'm going mad on the analogy here, where are the gaps? What happens if we come to do a deal? Where are the gaps? And you have the opportunity to set some expectations around, well, it's not going to do this. Are you absolutely sure you still want to do it? Yes, fantastic, let's carry on. No, okay, let's stop there. Let's not waste each other's time. Let's not do a bad deal. And that would be a very, very sensible thing to do. Okay, number 3 aspect of deal qualification is understanding how you're going to win. So let's say customer wants to buy some IT. It's a rectangle shaped bit of IT. We can sell them that. So asking or understanding how we're going to win will help us gain more information about that deal. We can ask questions like, what process is the client going to follow? Is it an RFI? Is it an RFP? Is it an RFQ? That's a request for information. It's normally the very early stages of a formal tender process. An RFI, general indication, can you provide these sorts of services? A request for proposal, and there's not normally a price indicated with an RFI, it's just a generic, can you provide these sorts of services? An RFP, a request for proposal, as its name suggests, is, okay, we've got these requirements. Can you give us a brief proposal that sort of gives us an indication of what service you would provide to what level and the kind of price that we're talking about to provide that service? That would be an RFQ. That would be an RFP, I beg your pardon. An RFQ, request for quotation, is often just another name alongside an RFP. Some people call them RFPs, some people call them RFQs, but they're both approximately the same thing. The important thing is that you're asking questions to uncover exactly what do they want to achieve from issuing this document, because it's going to take you some work to scroll through that document and deliver answers. It's going to take you a lot of work. So get to the bottom of that. And then that can also give leads. So you've got an RFI, you've got information, a request for proposal or quotation. And then if it's a really big deal, or perhaps it's from a public sector organization, it might go through to a full tender response, which will be a comprehensive document, and that will take you even more time to respond to. So just make sure you're getting into the right activities. You can ask the client what sort of timelines you're working to. And again, the answer will come back, we want this ASAP, as soon as possible. Well, what does that even mean? Is that next week? Is that next month? It's a really big deal. It might even be next year. Some really big deals that I've worked on have been something like a year to 18 months from initial contact right through to closing the deal. So it's important for you to understand when they're likely to do that, and the impact that it's going to have on your working week, on your organization and your manager, so you can manage their expectations. The other thing to be looking at is who do you need to talk to? Who in that client do you need to talk to? Going back to the Chief Information Officer, CIO, if that's the person that you're talking to, is it just the CIO? Should you be talking to, let's say, the head of data centers, the director of operations, who's responsible for operational effectiveness of the firm that you're talking to? Do you need to go and talk to them and how they see this deal working, what issues they've got, and the service, the proposal that you're going to offer to this company, is it going to meet their needs as well? And so one deal I worked on, particularly big deal, there were 280 people, a combination of the client company and my company and a couple of sales partners as well. And we had to get them all on board, all focused on this deal. It happened in the end. They don't always happen, but that's the kind of thing. Maybe for a reasonable size deal, you certainly need to be talking to 2 or 3 different people, but also in doing so, if you've only got one contact in your client company, and they might move, people move positions all the time. All of a sudden, your relationship with that company is lost or certainly at risk. So it's always good to know multiple people in an account so that you've got access to it all the time. And the third stage of that is, what messages do you need to be giving to that client, to who in that client, and when do they need to be receiving these messages? Now, that's very hard. We're talking about loose generic terms here, but the message to the director of operations might be one thing, and it might be different to the message that you give to the CIO. They're both effectively serving the same deal, and you're going to win the same deal, but it looks like different things. And that's really important to understand. Okay, so overriding message, slide number 3, is, do you have the resources to commit to seeing that deal all the way through? People, time, budget. And if you don't, or if it's going to be a struggle, you don't have to bid. But if you don't bid, be professional. Let the client know why you're not bidding. Perhaps it's non-core business. And just kind of be aware that that can have ramifications. So, for instance, one particularly large bid that I won one time was the third such bid in that client. We had 2 opportunities. One was a data center outsource, and the other was a piece of consultancy. The consultancy came first. It was worth about $1 million, and we engaged with that. We presented to that, and we lost. But that wasn't the end of the world, because this customer was a multi-billion dollar organization. There's lots of business, lots of opportunity in that account to do business. And we decided that we would bid for this consultancy because it would give us an opportunity to present to people in that account that we hadn't previously met. So it gave us exposure to those people. We could prove ourselves credible, whether we won or not, but we could prove ourselves credible. We got an opportunity to talk to them, to understand their view of the world. And in that regard, we just kind of tick the box, and that was, we had suddenly had a relationship with those people that we didn't have before. So even though we lost that particular deal of the consulting work, we still got something out of the process, a relationship with senior people in that deal. Just 1 second here. Excuse me. Okay, right. Thanks again. Right. So yes, we talked about losing a particular bid and being able getting something out of it still, in terms of a relationship with senior people in that company, and we moved on to a second stage. There were three stages to it, this particular deal. The second stage was a data center outsourced, again worth tens of millions of dollars. Didn't know if we had a win strategy available to us, excuse me, but it didn't really matter. It got us an opportunity to meet even more people, and it would pave the way to understanding a lot more about this client. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's sort of what happened. Again, knowing people, knowing the political landscape in an account is really, really important. Anyway, activity. I just wanted you to take, if you were reading this far into the webinar, if you're listening this far, I just want you to think now, just for a few seconds, around what high gain questions could you ask in your context, selling what you sell to the clients that you sell to. What would an example of a high gain question be? And just a reminder that high gain questions are those questions that get you lots of valuable information, not just any old information, but really valuable information. Maybe it's an understanding of their current cost base. Maybe it's an understanding of how much the problem is actually costing them as a business not to have the problem solved that you're going to be able to solve them. And also stuff that indicate that you know about your market. You might know in the IT world, for instance, that a telecoms company has an average percentage of revenue spend on IT, and it differs depending on what part of the world that you're in. But if you know that we're in the UK, it's a big wireless telco, and they spend whatever it happens to be on their account, but their competitor spends much less on IT, but still has a good reputation, then that puts them at a competitive risk. If you have a solution that is going to reduce their IT costs, but their overall costs by a big percentage, and therefore will make them more competitive, that puts you in a really valuable position. Okay, so that's worth bearing in mind. You thought of some questions? Excellent. Okay, right. So summing up, deal qualification. Understand everything about that deal. Listen to what the client has to say. You've got two ears, you've got one mouth. You should listen and talk in that ratio. Listen twice as much as you talk. You'll learn something. And when you do talk, add value. Don't make ridiculous comments. Don't just nod and grunt. Add some value. Tell them that you know what's going on in the marketplace. That's all part of understanding, building trust, rapport, credibility, all those things. Number two, ask high gain questions. Build knowledge, credibility about that deal, about that client, about their world. Know everything about it. Look for evidence. Try and put a financial number on the client's issue. For instance, if their IT costs are up here, but you can bring them down there, you can tell them that will increase perhaps their earnings per share at the end of the next quarter, or at the end of the quarter, that they'll start to get benefits from your deal. That makes you look like a business person rather than just a salesperson. Really, really important for a piece of credibility there to go forward. And remember, if you're going to give them a price, you're going to probably need to make some assumptions. Make sure those assumptions are clearly stated. Builds expectation and credibility around that. But no guessing. Don't guess. And if you are guessing, it's actually an assumption. Any guessing is an assumption. Clearly state it. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble. Okay, right. So anyway, huge thanks for watching this. Been watching me, Keith Rosell, aka Sales Marvel. The next webinar going to be doing is going to be on Friday, 22nd of March. We're going to be talking about sales pursuit strategies, i.e. strategy for you to invest your company's resources to win that piece of business. It's called a sales pursuit, and I really look forward to presenting that to you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look for me, Keith Rosell, R-O-Z-E-L-L-E. You can go to my website, which is salesmarvel.co.uk. There's lots and lots of information talking about sales-centric stuff, how to do stuff, just general informative stuff about selling. And hey, why not comment on this video? Reach out to me. I look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, wishing you every success in your sales world. Thank you very much.